We're going back to 1980, and just before the second British invasion hits the U.S. shores, the Police released the third of only 5 studio albums they would make. It's time for Zeyatta Mondatta. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome to 3324 podcast, home of the marbly mouthed host and
silent Sam.
The co-host that sits there and smirks while I mumble my way through and do take after take.
I'm a good listener.
Yes, I don't know if we're going to leave those in. There were so many of them, I might just cut them out this time. I like to leave the mistakes in, but this one was so many that people will be like, "Nah, these guys just don't know."
And they're right at the beginning, so who would have noticed?
Yeah,
true.
There you go.
That's right. You will never know. You'll never know the outtakes that we have here. So if it's your first time joining us, welcome. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Eric.
Happy New Year to you.
2025.
Right? Jesus.
Crazy.
Tempest
fugit.
Amazing.
I don't even know if it's a milestone anymore. You know, it's just the years are just blending together. They're just coming along.
They really do.
Let me put it this way. Every day vertical is a milestone.
There you go.
Yeah. Words to live by.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to our guest, Mr. Christopher Clark, the first guest of 2025. How do you like that milestone?
I feel very honored, and Happy New Year to the both of you as well.
Right? How do you like that one? First one in the chamber for 2025.
Feel awesome, and this is a great record to kick off the year with. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one that nobody can pronounce.
Actually, I have a harder time pronouncing the first album. So,
what? Outlandos de Mort? No, Regata de Blanc.
That's
Regata
the
de
second
Blanc.
one.
That's the second one. But Outlandos de Mort. Is it D'Amour or D'Amour?
I always said D'Amour.
D'Amour. Okay.
Outlandos de Mort.
Yeah.
This would be the last of the Police's interestingly titled and nonsensical album titles. They would actually go into standard English after this and go and use actual words and not jumbly stuff that they were kind of making up half words and half gibberish. But yeah, if you're your first time joining us, welcome. Happy New Year. And I'm glad you found us. We've got a lot of episodes you can check out. We've also got a YouTube channel, social media, all that great stuff. You'll find it in the links in the show notes. So you could just do it there. And then your New Year's resolution, from what I understand, is you're going to follow us. So make sure you follow that New Year's resolution and hit the follow button. And you've already done your first New Year's resolution. Everything else, don't go to the gym. I don't care what you do. But your New Year's resolution to follow us is easily accomplished.
Smooth. Very
right?
smooth.
Nice.
That was nice.
Good plug. Good plug.
Off the cuff. I don't write this stuff. I don't think about it. It just...
Yeah.
Bleh.
No.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
Eric knows of 43
some odd years. Yeah. Let's move on.
Of him dealing with that. So he should get he talk about milestones. He should get a milestone award for that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For tolerance. Especially when me and our other friend Johnny get together. Forget it.
Yeah, I can't win.
The patience of a Zen master at that point.
Yeah.
A Zenyatta master.
There you go.
A Zenyatta. Oh.
Yeah.
First pun of the year. You got it.
There you go.
Right. All right. Let's get to business. Let's talk the stats of this album, which is some factual information that we're going to go into before we start giving the opinions and all that kind of conjecture and whatnot. So this was released in October of 1980, produced by The Police and Nigel Gray. There were 2 singles released: Don't Stand So Close to Me, hit number 10, and Da-Do-Do-Do, Da-Da-Da-Da, also hit number 10. So there's both of them had the equal impact on the American charts. They actually won 2 Grammys for this album. Best rock performance by a duo or a group with vocal. Or Don't Stand So Close. Those Grammy designations are so long. Best rock performance by a duo or a group with a vocal. Okay, for Don't Stand So Close to Me. And then oddly enough, best rock instrumental performance for Behind My Camel.
For a rather controversial track.
Right? Yeah. Within the Police ranks, a very divisive track.
Yep.
And despite that, I'm not sure it's Grammy worthy, but we'll get into that later. It hit number 5 on Billboard. It spent almost 3 years on the chart. This was back in the days of when albums would just hang on the charts and just kind of be there. They would just kind of, they would hit as high as they were going to hit, but then they would just kind of become evergreens and just kind of bubble in the back, and people would just kind of keep buying them. This went 2 times platinum, which means 2,000 in excess of 2 million copies sold. Sorry. And the Police were 2003 Hall of Fame inductees. Here's a copy of the vinyl for those on YouTube watching it. These beautiful gents make an appearance on every album cover in one form or another. They always have their photos. And this is just a really nice, simple, but effectively colored album cover. Just it's kind of pops and it gets the job done. It's simple, and it lets you know that that's the group you're listening to, which is really good. So there you go, Zeyatta Mondatta.
One of my first vinyls that I owned.
Yeah.
Wish I still had it, but my Gateway Police record.
Were you into this from the beginning? Because I don't remember getting into the Police until Ghost in the Machine. So obviously this was out and around, but I don't remember digging into the Police till like 82.
Yeah, I wasn't really a fan at this point. I heard some stuff, of course, from the other 2 records, but I think I think I got it for my birthday. Somebody had gifted it to me and thinking that I would like it, and I did. I put it on and I was just like, I love this. This is, some really nice stuff on here, some nice grooves and things like that. But we'll get into that. But
yeah, especially for the time, especially for 1980, which is kind of a transitional era. Now, Chris, where do the Police fit in with you? Because you've got a very eclectic taste.
Yeah.
Which is good. That means you like a lot of different things. But
yes,
where did the Police fit into that?
So for me, like the Police were always kind of like, as a kid, the first thing I remember is I was very, very, very little, but I remember like the video for Every Breath You Take being on MTV all the time. Like, cause MTV was kind of always in the background somewhere on a TV. And then as I got older and I started getting into different types of music, once I got past hair metal, and I started listening to different forms of music, I definitely got into the Police. My aunt gave me a vinyl copy of their first record when she was getting rid of her vinyl. And then one of my oldest friends, my really good friend Angela, who I actually picked her brain a little bit about the Police for this episode, just because she has a better depth of knowledge about them than I do. She was really into them, and I was, it was just kind of one of those things. And I really got into them much more heavily as I got later into high school and college and started to do a deep dive of their stuff. But I always was very much a fan of like Reggatta de Blanc is one of my favorite records.
Yeah.
When the internet became a thing and I started discovering the Police, I started listening to a lot of live recordings from like that Reggatta de Blanc era and really got into how incredible and powerful a live band they were so early on in their career. And then slowly but surely worked my way through all the records. In fact, I actually went back last year and listened to all of them and tried to figure out where I would rank all the records. And I was surprised that I ranked this one higher than Ghost in the Machine and Outlandish Demore. I have this one.
Interesting.
I have this one third behind Synchronicity and Reggatta de Blanc if I think about my ranking, but they're all in their own way incredible records. So.
If you look at the rankings on YouTube and stuff, this one always seems to be last. This like the worst.
Really?
And I don't understand that because I think this is a really great. This record does not. And I don't know if it's because the Police shit on it so much because they felt like it was rushed and they didn't do what they thought they could do with this record. But to me, this is Andy Summers' best guitar tone. The drum sound on it is really good. And it might not necessarily be the best writing, but I still think it's as strong as anything else in their catalog.
Yeah. You hit on a lot of good points. Let me just kind of pull a couple of the threads that both of you kind of gave because there's a lot there to chew on. First of all, for anybody that's interested in rock music or interested mildly into the Police, get into them because they only put out 5 albums. So it's not a big discography, which is great. And I think I had said this during the Synchronicity episode, and I think Eric disagreed. I had said I would put as in, 5 albums that's their discography. I would put that up against a lot of other groups that they didn't stay around long enough to really have a shitty album.
No, none of them are
pretty quickly. But by the time we get to Zeyatta Mondatta, it's their middle album. It's right in the middle of the 5, and it is the transitional album for them.
Yeah,
they were kind of punky and reggae-y in the first two albums, and everything was kind of a little more up-tempo and really quick. Not really punky, but punky for them. And then when you get to this album, first of all, it's one of my favorite sounding albums. I love the sound.
And that to me stood out when I did a deep dive of this record. When I went to this record today, that's what stood out to me is the sound.
Yeah, it has, for something that came out in 1980, it has a modern sound, but it doesn't have an 80s sound. It doesn't have the British second British invasion sound. It's got Eric, maybe more akin. I was looking at albums that came out in 1980, and Gaucho from Steely Dan came out. Now, I'm not putting it akin to Gaucho, but I think it has more in common with its sound, meaning it's got that really just nice, clean. Gaucho might be a little bit too extreme because that's really the glossiest that Steely Dan got. But I kind of put it in that category of albums that are just really easy to listen to because they sound so good. This album sounds like just great to listen to, which makes it easier just to digest everything.
I agree. And I think it might be one of the model or perfect example of a new wave album, and just because of the sound. I think you're trying to develop what is the new wave sound going to sound like. I mean, punk it's rough. It's and those first two albums, especially the first, were just that. Regatta de Blanc was a step up. I think they kind of got their groove going with that record. It was a better album, and then this one, like you say, the transition, but I find it to be probably their most accessible record to listen to. If anybody's getting into the Police for the first time, this would be the one to start with. Agreed. I think, because it just the songs are not really pushing it too far. Maybe it was a little rushed, perhaps. Maybe on certain songs you might see that. But I think, but again, from beginning to end, I think it's a great sounding album, and it's not a bad album at all. So why people think that it's like, I don't necessarily think that people think it's bad. I just think that it just, compared to some of the other work, it might be they're just, maybe because it's too accessible, maybe they're not trying hard enough, that kind of thing. So
yeah. Well, Chris, before I kick it over to you, let me address the both of you has made comments that the Police didn't care for this record. There's a specific reason for it. Now, this album was recorded in 4 weeks, which isn't horrible because I think they recorded Ghost in the Machine in 6 weeks, so they gave themselves a little bit more time. But what had happened was the album was literally completed the day they were starting a world tour. So they literally ran out of time. So they didn't get, in their opinion, to put the final polish on the apple, meaning they probably may have wanted to spend more time with it, but that does not mean that these songs are incomplete, and they're certainly not incomplete sounding. So I don't want people to get the impression that, if you read about it, that they felt they didn't have enough time. That they had pretty much done it. I mean, if this is 4 weeks, like I defy anybody else to do an album of this quality, of this sound, of this depth in 4 weeks. So Chris, I'll kick it over to you.
I was going to say, I think the thing is, and again, I have two friends in my life that are really huge Police fans. Another one is a coworker of mine, my friend Jerry, and he made the point too that not so much how much time they had to record the record, but that they weren't ready to go in. They weren't prepared, and they kind of went in and had to figure it out as they went along. Whereas maybe with Ghost in the Machine, they had a little bit more time to get their act together before they went in and put that record out, which, clearly they had the time to get those songs together because there's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of diversity on that album. And I think that the fact that they felt so rushed and they had to go on tour, so they had to master it. They were working on redoing the master the day before they handed in the tapes and all those kinds of things. And it's really where the cracks start to begin, and you hear them, all that infighting. And I think because they associate it with that, and that's what the band talks about when this record comes out, maybe it's also kind of like seeped its way into the mind of the fans that they're associating with is almost like the beginning of the end of the Police.
Yeah, I can't, Eric. I can't. I don't feel that at all. I don't even think of the album like that because I listen to this and I hear classics. I hear "Don't Stand So Close to Me." I hear "Do Do Do Do," which are great, but and those aren't even the best. Probably not even the best tracks. "Driven to Tears." I mean, they started to also get into a little bit of a political. They also started to get some socially conscious stuff in there. So so not only were they developing musically and kind of refining the elements of reggae, refining the elements of jazz and rock, and finding out what the mix was on this album. then they started to, mature as songwriters as well as lyricists. Sting felt more comfortable that, okay, I have something to say, so I'm going to put it out there now. We're not just going to make these quick bouncy songs about general stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it just more or less, like you say, they found their sound. I think with this record, it's what is it? Is it this? Is it that? Is it? Well, they may manage to kind of have the perfect recipe, I guess, in the sense of of combining all of those elements. And you even introduced some new stuff on here that you didn't really hear before, like a little bit of ska. Even with Canary in a Coal Mine and things like that. So they're experimenting with even more type of music and things like that, which would carry over, of course. But it just, again, I don't have a problem with this album either. I mean, it was, like I said, this is how I got into the Police. And of course, going back, with Regatta de Blanc, I think that was probably my second album that I got, and I love that. And it just kept going from there. I just love this band, became obsessed with them for a time. Everything I had. I mean, even the stuff that the Brimstone and Treacle soundtrack, some of the, of course, Sting going solo with the Dream of the Blue Train, because that was around the time too when Synchronicity was done, and I remember that MTV, when they were gearing up for that big promo of before the album was released. When Chris, you mentioned that, I remember that myself. I just remember that big promo. It was just a little snippets of every song. I think maybe 30 seconds of every song, and then they released the album. But yeah, I mean, this was the token album for that time. And like I said, it just got me into them. Good stuff.
I think it was the one that kind of really broke through. I mean, the other two had, Message in a Bottle and Roxanne and So Lonely, a lot of great stuff. But this, again, I went back and listened to the album before just to kind of hear, and it's the same producer. It's Nigel Gray produced the previous two albums, but there is a difference. This, usually when you stick with a producer, you kind of get the same thing, but there is a distinct difference in the sound of this album and the album before. And it is a marked, decidedly different. And then it would be decidedly different when they hook up with You Padgham for Ghost in the Machine. We get a darker, we get a thicker feel to it. This has got kind of an open and just kind of really, I think that's what it is. It has like an open feel to it. You can hear everything. You can hear Andy Summers' guitar work within, he's not buried in the mix. And because it's only a trio, you're going to get that anyway, Chris.
I was going to say that just that whole open and upbeat flavor. It's one of the people I talked to about, she said, I always liked the fact that this record is where you get to where driving home the idea of like the upbeat music with the lyrics that inspire Dread.
Yeah, Bombs Away.
Yeah,
it's a very up-tempo song, but it's a very political song,
Don't Stand So Close to Me is kind of creepy, but it's like this upbeat chorus and stuff.
That's what great music does, though, is it can be infinitely listenable, but getting a message in or getting something across. Now, I wrote in my notes, I wrote that the Police were so very much like Rush, but very unlike Rush.
Rush loved the Police too. They were huge
a
Police
power
fans.
trio, right?
Yeah.
But I tend to think, and people are going to make the case for Rush also, but I really tend to think of the Police as three distinct musical personalities. Very distinct music personalities. Now you could say that for Rush as well, but you had Neil Peart wrote every lyric. So you had somebody that was kind of in control overall. Now, Stuart Copeland and Andy Summers didn't get a lot of writing credits, but they were writers. Yeah. And Andy Summers came from such an avant-garde style of guitar playing, juxtaposed with Stuart Copeland's, syncopation and off-kilter beats and just always doing something different. And then Sting bringing the jazz stuff in and the lyrics. And it was, like Rush seems like a team. Like it seems like three guys are all kind of on the same page. Not that the Police aren't, but the Police seem like three distinct personalities that come together.
And I feel like this is the record where that took shape.
Yeah, three distinct egos.
Yeah,
there.
Very much so.
That would, of course, make a big impact. But Sting. Most of the songs are written by Sting. but Sting's not going to tell Stuart Copeland how to play drums. You know what I mean? Because that's, Copeland would just put that to bed, right? Because that's the way he was or is. And the same thing with Andy Summer. I think Andy Summer is probably a little less outspoken about it. I don't think he argued quite half as much with Sting as Stuart Copeland did. I think after a while, Summers was just like, fuck this shit, whatever. But Stuart Copeland and Sting, I think they fucking pushed each other's buttons big time.
Yeah.
Big
So
time.
let's talk about Behind My Camel, because it's the instrumental that won the Grammy Award. It's not much of an instrumental. It's more avant-garde, because Andy Summers wrote it, and Sting is like, I'm not playing on this. This is shit. I'm not playing on it. And from Wikipedia, supposedly, Sting took the tapes and buried them out and back in the garden.
Can you imagine?
Like, I'm not going to play on it. So Andy Summers like, all right, I'll play bass. And it's not like there's a whole lot of bass going on in there. So
no.
It's single notes. It's not really complicated.
Yeah, doom doom. I'm like, you know what, Sting, you're going to be the main guy, and everybody else has to play on your songs. Humor the guy. It's going on the record anyway, right? And people are going to think it was you anyway.
Yeah,
it's not going to be like all tracks on Sting except for that on the. It's not going to be a sticker on the album.
And he could have done something with it. He could have made it better. That's the thing. I mean, you just add your.
It was. Here's the material I'm presenting. We all play on it. That's it.
Yeah.
It's just so, it's a little pompous Sting has got the ego, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the talent to match it. So it's not like he doesn't have the material to back it up, but it's like, just play on the fucking song. And it ended up winning a Grammy, which is just weird.
The irony,
must have been, God, it must have been a slap in the face.
Andy Summers must have been making faces behind Sting's back the whole time.
Yeah.
You don't want to play. You think it's it's trashy or whatever. So it's just really, really strange. It's just and then things would start to get pettier, more petty and more petty and more petty. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit more about Andy Summers, because he's a very interesting guitar player, and I noticed
phenomenal.
I noticed on this album, and we could go to all of his other albums, he's not really a rhythm guitar player. He doesn't play rhythm guitar, right? He'll strum some chords and some really small chord phrases, but not full on chords. But mostly plays guitar phrases or picking and plucking style.
Mm-hmm.
But not really. You don't hear like these acoustic, strumming guitars or even strumming electric guitars. You really hear usually phrases and licks and accents the way he plays, which again gives the Police that different feel to it, right? Because like I said, he's not filling the traditional role that a guitar player would fill in a three-piece, who would do kind of all the guitar work. He still kind of keeps himself to the style he likes to play,
and he doesn't overplay either.
No. He gives it out. He gives a lot of the stuff, especially in the later stuff. When you think of Wrapped Around Your Finger,
mm-hmm.
I just love that riff. I love that little bam, 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 bam. That just those little textures and moments that he adds to which makes the song. It's those little those little beats, those little brush strokes, or whatever you want to call it. That's what makes them unique. I think that's what their sound. Yeah, I mean, he could play a lot of rhythm and be more of a rock and roll type guitar player, but that's just not his vibe.
Yeah.
I think he just likes to, be out there. And there's several players like that, especially in the prog world or whatever, sort of offbeat or experimental. But yeah, I mean, he definitely adds those little flavors to the songs, and I think it's they're all the better for it. So yeah.
And on some level, you kind of have to wonder, should he get more credit with the writing? Because I mean, just like things you read about how these songs came to life, it's like Sting came in with the meat of the song, but then like it's like even like on Synchronicity with Every Breath You Take, like he's the one that came up with the guitar figure or the line or the lick that really kind of tied everything into place. And so is it really fair to say that he wasn't a writer on some of those cuts? Because he really, I mean, if you take him out, it's not anywhere near as good or as beautiful
No.
or as interesting if he's not there playing. So
Yeah,
Right.
I think Andy Summers is the least recognized member of the Police, right? Because Stuart Copeland is lanky, he's tall, he's behind the drums, and people
and he's a
know him.
loudmouth.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you make a good point that kind of Andy Summers he's on stage, but Sting at the front of the stage is going to take up all the oxygen, right? Everyone's going to be looking at Sting on stage, so Andy Summers, invariably is going to be kind of put to the side. But his contributions, like you said, he's very unique. Stuart Copeland is doing very unique. They're all doing their own unique stuff and not compromising, but it all fits. That's the whole beauty of it. Is Stuart Copeland never plays a straight backbeat. He kind of always puts in his things, but he puts them in where it fits for him. And then Andy, it's like a puzzle that they all fit together and of putting all this stuff in. So, but it doesn't sound like mishmash garbage because everybody does it tastefully. And then Sting puts in his bass licks, and sometimes they're very simple when they need to be to allow room for the other instruments. And then sometimes they're very intricate and advanced. And then the other guys lay back, and that's I think was the magic of the Police is kind of each one was such a strong personality, which is going to lead to those clashes. But that's how you get when Stuart Copeland doesn't back down. That's probably what led to Sting leaving. Is I need and Andy Summers, by the time Synchronicity came around, he goes, we're like the backing band for Sting. We're kind of like because I felt like I was a backing band for a pop singer. So he was starting to feel that the pull of Sting's popularity.
And then what I was going to say is a few months ago, Stuart Copeland did a video for Drumeo. It's like a drum YouTube channel, and he was saying like early on in the Police's career, Sting was the writer, but then he would bring the stuff to him or to Andy and be like, what do you think of this? And he was allowed himself to be a little bit more critiqued or to get feedback and to talk about where we can make it better and all that kind of stuff. And as he grew in his confidence and realized what a phenomenal songwriter he is, he was less willing to be compromising or democratic about what those songs are going to be. And I think this record, the circumstances it was made under and the fact that this is where the cracks really started to surface, I think that's where you see Sting starting to assert himself, but then Stuart Copeland also trying to pull back and, assert himself as well. So I think that's where this really starts to happen is this album.
Yeah, there was definitely, like you said, that the tension between Stuart and Sting. I think to the point also where Stuart would bring stuff to Sting, music, like songs completed, and Sting would be like, we're chucking the lyrics. And I'll write all new lyrics. Again, Stuart Copeland, he writes perfectly fine songs. They're quirky.
They're very quirky.
But
they're his.
Yeah, they're his. I mean, Bombs Away is a great catchy song on this album. It's one of the. I think it's a standout. I think it's a really kind of interesting, just like Mitch Podenko, and he's got a particular style, but it fits within. It fits within the Police framework. You would not know that Stuart Copeland was writing that song.
No,
it's not that. It's not so far afield that it's like, oh, okay, the other guy wrote this. Andy Summers songs are like that. His songs are always like you could tell.
Mother.
Mother is so out there. Oh my God!
Yeah, you gotta go see our you gotta listen to our Synchronicity episode. We talk about Mother.
But then he also wrote "Murder by Numbers," which to me is a fitting song, like for Sting to be performing as well.
I think he wrote that with Sting, though, right? They wrote that together. So a little bit of Sting kind of taming him a little bit, because he's the avant-garde guy. He's the guy that kind of can get a little crazy with things.
Yeah,
but you want that.
You need it.
And I love it. Yeah, that's what I love about it. Yeah, I think that's what Sting is missing. I think as much as Sting is a commanding presence, I think I think Hugh Padgham said it during the Ghost in the Machine sessions. He goes, "These guys were not. It was not comfortable. I wanted to quit. It was really bad. One guy would be in the studio, the other two wouldn't be there." And he goes, "But that tension is what we needed." And we've talked umpteen times about great albums like Rumors that were born out of tension, and how even if it's uncomfortable, that people seem to bring their best work, or it brings out the best in their writing, or whatever it is. It's not great for them, I'm sure. I'm certainly not diminishing what they're going through, but we've used our poster boys, Townsend and Daltrey, like all, we can go with the Stones, Jagger and Richards. There's countless teams or groups that have that infighting that it helps produce their best work, Chris. I mean, you think that's part of the secret sauce of rock and roll is bands don't get along?
I don't necessarily think it's every band, but I do think it's many bands. Like you talk about trios, and like, so in 1980 you had the Police make Zeyatta Mondatta, where they were starting to get at each other's throats. But at the same time, this is also the same era where you have Rush making Moving Pictures and Permanent Waves, which are both masterpieces, but made in full of peace, love, and good happiness stuff. Like, that band always seemed to get along. So I think for some bands you need that tension to create great art, and for other bands it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. It just needs to be three guys with really good interplay and the ability to work democratically. I think I don't think it's a one size fits all, honestly.
Well, I mean, some of the stuff that came out in 1980, just to kind of put, for people that weren't there, to kind of put things in perspective, Remain in Light from the Talking Heads came out. Scary Monsters from Bowie. Back in Black from AC/DC. Peter Gabriel's 1980 album, Eric.
Melt.
Which one would that Melt? Blizzard of Oz from Ozzy.
Another
Heaven and Hell from Sabbath. Stevie Wonder's Hotter Than July. John Lennon's Double Fantasy. Gaucho, like we said earlier, from Steely Dan. Permanent Waves from Rush. The other power trio. For the purposes of this episode, we'll refer to them as the other power trio. No offense to
the Canadians.
Freedom of choice from Devo. So now you start to see, some things changing. And then RG Bargy from Squeeze, which we did an episode on. Right? Making Movies from Dire Straits, a great album. They're Empty Glass from Pete Townsend. Glass Houses from Billy Joel. I mean, a lot of this stuff is kind of standard rock and roll stuff that, wouldn't be surprising. I think the Police fits in with all that. That seems to be in a class of 1980s, kind of an eclectic class there. You got a little bit of that that post punk with Talking Heads, right?
And Bowie too. That
represents
Scary Monsters.
And then Devo represents like the kind of moving forward stuff, the dawn of like the electronic age, and what that would represent. The River from Bruce Springsteen, also with Hungry Heart. Double album. So they're the Police certainly weren't the biggest act during that time. They were, Back in Black is the king, would end up being the king of all albums. So, and like I said, 2 million out the door is not huge for a band. But for the Police, I think it's good. I think it set them up. It kind of it positioned them to go forward. I think that's what this album did, is it kind of took them out of the first two albums, which are very kind of similar, right? I think we agree that the first two are kind of like a 1-2 punch. They're kind of go back to back really well. Then, even from the opening of Zeyatta Mondatta, it just has a different feel to it. With the way Don't Stand So Close, we kind of opens up. It's got this kind of, keyboard thing kind of going.
And a little bit of synthesizer happening.
Well, slow build. And then you get this, here's the Police of the 80s.
I think it was Rob that said it when we did the episode on Houses of the Holy. That Houses of the Holy was kind of like a hinge album. I really think in the Police catalog, however brief and short it is, I think this would be the hinge album for those 5 records.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It positioned them to do something radically different moving forward. And then to go, the group that goes out on the highest note ever.
Right.
Probably has to be the Police. Like, I mean, it's got to be the Police, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it isn't so far afield from the first 2 albums, like, where you're like, this is just a complete like left turn. Like it's like, it's a progression.
Yeah.
And
it tracks.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's not like you say, well, this doesn't sound like them at all.
Yeah, I think Ghost in the Machine kind of gets you there.
Yeah.
I think Zenyatta Mondatta kind of, I think, Eric, what do you think? Like Zenyatta Mondatta and Ghost in the Machine is probably the biggest leap.
Yeah.
Between the two, right? Between anything in their discography, to make the leap from this album to Ghost in the Machine is that, that's a really, like, it's got a darker tone to it. It's got,
it had to be, I think, because of some of the albums you just mentioned. I mean, we're talking, Talking Heads, and these people were pushing the limits, Rush and, and stuff like that. They had to do something like that. They had to go there.
More ambitious.
Yeah, absolutely. So
and it's interesting too, because Ghost is probably the record I like the least.
Really? That was the one I was introduced to. I was the person I was going out with at the time. That's all she played Ghost in the Machine incessantly.
Yeah.
And the White Fleetwood Mac album.
That's a good record.
Those were like the two things I remember about, like, and it was like Ghost in the Machine just endlessly flipping over the album, flipping over. So I really kind of associate it with certain memories, but that was the one I'm kind of like that. And then I went forward. I went to Synchronicity. Then I leapfrogged back to Zeyatta Mondatta, which is odd, So yeah, I don't know how many people got into Ghost in the Machine as their first one, but
it's to me, it's the oddball. It's definitely
just in case.
Probably the most sort of proggy album I dare say. I mean, there's some stuff on there. I mean, it does tend to be a little offbeat, and I do mean offbeat when I say that. That's like purposely, hitting sour notes and things like that. They're just that can get a little grating. I listen and you think of Demolition Man, and that fucking thing goes on.
I like that. It's their longest song.
It's the longest song, but man, is it,
it.
But it makes you feel something else, though, right? I mean, it kind of was one of the first albums that I got into that made me feel like, I'm not sure if I like this, but yet it works. It's effective. They're doing something different.
Compelling album. Which is very, very, very different from this.
Yeah.
This still has the vestiges of the reggae. Like I said, the ska. I mean, I love how Driven to Tears and When the World is Running Down kind of go right into each other.
That's great.
One of my favorite things.
Almost like a live show.
Yeah, it's just like, it's used very judiciously. Like some albums kind of do that. They just kind of run into things, even if it's not usually you get that with a concept album. But that it was just used in the right way that it just kind of carries you right to the next song. And both songs are just so great. When the World is Running Down is probably one of my favorite, probably easily top 10, maybe top 7 Police songs.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just got that openness to it. It's got the musicality. It's kind of sentimental. He's mentioning VCRs and turning on my stereo. And back then it was current, but now it's kind of like you can kind of listen to it and be like, oh, wow,
What I always find interesting about the Police too is, like, I love reggae and ska. My brother and I grew up in the 90s when punk was big, and there was like this kind of like ska revival and all that kind of stuff. So that was one of those things that attracted me to the Police. But what I found interesting is in listening to Stuart Copeland talk about where he gets those upstrokes and all of that like reggae and ska type vibe is actually, he attributes it to growing up in the Middle East because his dad was in the CIA. And the drumming and the percussion of that music has a lot of similarities to that ska flavor, which I always found interesting that he got it from a different place that wasn't the Caribbean.
Yeah, he would definitely, Eric, right? He would definitely, the Police on Ghost in the Machine, not to make this a Ghost episode, they would start to it kind of invoke a lot more of the world music sound.
Yeah.
Yep.
On Ghost in the Machine. So this kind of has, the Police are always going to be thrown into the reggae bin.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of it's just kind of going to be with them. And it is, that's kind of, one of the major influences.
But who else was doing that too, though? The Clash, they were kind of doing that to, London
Specials.
Calling. There was something. Yeah, so I don't know who influenced who, but at that point in time, the late 70s, early 80s was just sort of doing that kind of stuff. But point is that they weren't just a straight up punk band or any one thing.
No.
And that's what I love about it, is the eclectic nature of what they were doing. So
I think once you bring Andy Summers into the band to replace Harry Padavani, I think his name was, then he comes in with that. I mean, and he had that very distinct guitar tone in which he attributes to the Fender Telecaster he was playing. But like when he comes in, all bets are off, and I think that's really where they start to abandon the idea that we're going to be a punk band and we're going to be punk, and they bring in all those other flavors.
Yeah, and when they asked him to join Andy Summers, he's like, "I'll join, but we got to be a trio." And they didn't want to fire Padavani.
Yeah.
So they kept him
Gave
at
him
the
punk cred.
Scorpies for a little, and then eventually they kicked him out. They're like,
Yeah.
he wasn't up to. He wasn't up to. I don't think I don't think I think when Andy Summers came in, it really kind of made apparent that his talents really weren't where the police were going to be or what they needed. That Andy Summers was just kind of on a different level, like Chris is saying, and then so they ended up chucking him. So Andy Summers got his wish for a trio.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And he was a lot older. He was like 10 years older than those guys too. He was like they wanted Andy Summers because he was a seasoned guy, kind of knew his way around things, and
he was
had
in
a
the
lot
Animals.
of experience. What's that?
He was in when the Animals broke up and Eric Burden put together a new version of the Animals.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the new Animals. I think he's on that song San Franciscan Nights that's on the Easy Rider soundtrack, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It's
so he's been around.
Yeah, he's in his 80s for sure.
Yeah, he's
81.
He's 81.
Yep.
Jeez. And Sting is
So,
what?
yeah, 10 years
Sting-a-ling is what? 60s?
I think he's like 72, 73.
He's in his 70s by now, yeah.
Sting is 73. So, yeah. He's, he's the elder.
I hope we look like that when we're 73.
Or even like Stuart Copeland. Watch him play the drums a couple of months ago. It was crazy because he still has it.
He's never lost it.
Oh my God.
I think it's rare for the most part. I mean, you don't really hear of drummers, even when they're getting older, that really can't drum anymore. Charlie Watts was drumming up until he passed away and got ill. But you would think that drumming would like take a toll. That would be like one of the first kind of, except for Phil Collins. Phil Collins is probably the only guy I think I could think of really where that can't drum
physically.
Everybody else these guys are still doing it, and they're still doing it, pretty successfully.
Really well.
Yeah, like you would think that this would be the first instrument where people would start to lose a step, but God bless them. It's not stopping. Maybe that's just the endurance. Maybe that's just all the muscle memory you have that you kind of don't lose it. Even guitar players. I don't think we found. I think we're kind of blessed that a lot of these legacy acts that are still around for the most part. They're not embarrassing themselves.
No.
They're pretty much. Like Elton John is like, I got to retire. I'm not doing well. So it's like, okay, before it gets,
but they know it. Once you know it, I mean, you should, but
McCartney's what, 82?
Yeah, he won't give
82 up. Or 83, yeah.
He just will not give up.
Still sings all those songs in the same key.
Yeah. And his voice his voice will probably go before his musical.
Oh yeah,
most likely.
Because he's touring incessantly now, and it's gonna kill him.
I think it's also too as far as drummers go, it's how you approach the kit. I mean, look at Neil Peart in his later years. I mean, he retaught himself how to play. He got he was taking lessons. Yeah, he was taking it from a veteran jazz drummer, and he just reinvented himself. Like, why did he feel the need to do that? I don't know, but he did. And he, as a result, I mean, you used to listen to some of those later records. I mean, you could definitely tell he just wasn't. You can, almost swear that it might have been a different drummer. Just in the style and the way he was holding the stick, even the old school, like holding it, off the thumb, and just I mean, amazing. But like you say, it does take its toll if you're friggin' just putting all your physicality in it, which. In Stuart Copeland's case, it wasn't necessary because he knew how to, with his flamming and his absolute, like the light touches and everything, effective. Just he knew when to step off, when not to do too much, and it was amazing. It's almost
definitely a finesse drummer.
Yeah, he should be in the conversation when people talk about like Moon and Bonham and Peart and all those people. He really should be in the conversation more often about the greatest drummers that ever lived. Because
you know why he probably isn't is probably because of the short discography. I think it's in his case it probably works against him that they're probably like, oh yeah, it's the Police. They put out 5 albums and they had some hits.
Yeah,
and then it's easy to kind of drag the drummer in that case because you're not really. You're not getting a chance to really have a concept album where they really kind of.
Well, he's been in several bands, like these sort of offshoot, sort of quirky bands, but which were great. Working with Les Claypool and
that's a great album.
Yeah.
On the Doors, he was on with the Doors.
Yep.
And, I'm probably one of maybe 5 people that actually had the Rhythmatist, which was a solo record, which was him basically going around the world recording different beats, like in Africa, like African tribal stuff, and then putting his drums and his musicality on top of that. Very interesting, but it wasn't obviously didn't sell anything. I mean, it was not the kind of thing you just throw on, but it was just as a frustrated percussionist, I was so into that kind of stuff.
I mean,
Chris, are you a play? Did you ever play the PS1 PlayStation?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, he did the Stuart Copeland did some of the music for Spyro the Dragon.
Yeah.
That's right. I do remember reading that. He was video games and movie scores. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he did Good Burger.
Did he really?
Yeah, he did. Of course, I had Rumblefish. I had
she's having the soundtrack for Rumblefish.
She's having a baby. Like he did. He did some score work, and you could definitely has that sound. That's Bombs Away. Those off sort of weird notes and things, and you could definitely tell it's a Stuart Copeland track when you hear that kind of stuff. So
he's one of those drummers, man. The minute he puts sticks in his hand, it's him. Like he's one of those drummers that
very
no
distinctive.
Matter where he's playing, so good. That snare sound.
I remember Daltrey had a. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dean. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You were saying Daltrey?
Daltrey had a solo album, Under the Raging Moon, which was okay, but he had that one song, and they had all these guest drummers on it. I seem to recall, and Stuart Copeland was there, and God, I think he had. I think he had like all the greats playing on this one song. You could definitely tell who was who, though. You know what I mean? If you get to Cozy Powell, and it's like, yeah, who's this? But then you hear Stewart with the hi-hats and all that Stuart Copeland. You just definitely know.
That's awesome.
I think it's his snare drum. He doesn't put a lot of the metal, the metal things under, whatever they're called underneath. I forget what it's called, like the trap or whatever. But his has more of a solid, almost like a bongo sound. It's
a crack.
Yep.
Yeah, it's something that it doesn't have that snare drummy sound to it, so it's immediately associated with Stuart Copeland. Like when you hear it, it's like there's only one guy that does that. No one really tries to copy that.
It's very tight.
And his cymbal work is very distinctive too.
Yeah, and then all those little extras that he puts in with the little small cymbals and just all those intricate bits that are totally associated with him now. Like that, no one really tries to do that. It's kind of like that's.
Well, I think Trevor Horn had that in mind when they did Owner of a Lonely Heart. Mm-hmm. He wanted Yes to sound like the Police. The guitar, some of that rhythm guitar you hear is very sort of staccato, like Andy. And then Alan White, very simple, like Stuart Copeland. You wanted that sound, and if you really listen, it's wow. This could be you could mistake, not obviously like John Anderson, but that part of the song is like, that's very Police sounding. It's very, that distinctive, so yeah.
I've been going down a Trevor Horn rabbit hole recently too, as a producer, like kind of looking at all this stuff. He did a concert a couple of years ago. A lot of it's on his YouTube channel of him doing the songs of artists that he produced.
Yeah.
So he does like Owner of a Lonely Heart, and he does Welcome to the Pleasure Dome by Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and he does Bugle stuff, and he kind of did a career retrospective concert of the artists that he did, just to kind of show which I was kind of like, wow, that's kind of pretty neat that he kind of like, I'm going to show you all the stuff I worked on, and I'm going to perform those songs for you. And he would have guests come out when needed.
And that's cool because instead of just releasing an album. Yeah. Which most people do, sort of retrospective kind of thing like that, right? But here, that's really cool.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to perform them for you, and he did Frankie Goes to Hollywood, which is one of my favorite albums of the '80s. So I don't know if we'll ever get an episode of it, but it's a corker.
Frankie, say relax.
Yes, say relax, don't do it. And when I heard relax, I just for some reason that song just hit me, and then I got the cassette, and I was like, this album is actually brilliant. A lot of people thought, and they were a one-note band, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, but that album, it's just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And mainly because of Trevor Horn, he kind of went in, and just not to get on a Trevor Horn thing, but he kind of went in and redid, like, much to the band's chagrin, is he went in and re-recorded a lot of the instruments himself, and like, what the fuck are you doing?
He did that with Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
What would fly? What was it? Fly out of here or fly?
Fly from here.
Fly From Here.
It's a later period record, but that's actually very good.
It's really good. His version is really good. They had one of the new singers, and they recorded the album, toured it, and Jeff Downs was involved in that project.
Yep.
And then Trevor Horn produced the record, but he came back. He's like, I'm gonna for shits and giggles, I'm gonna lay my vocals. And they re-released the album with his vocals, and they just completely cut the other guy out and just re-release. Yeah,
there you go, Trevor Horn for you. We'll get to him eventually one day. Let's go back to the police. Let's talk about. I mentioned a couple of my favorites, but we didn't really get to talk about yours, Chris. What are the standouts? And take out "Don't Stand So Close to Me" to do don't count.
All right, and "Don't Stand So Close to Me." Just as a little aside, I was always surprised. I heard somewhere that they re-recorded it because they didn't like the way it sounded on this record, which just always blew my mind.
Re-recording was horrible.
It's terrible. Yeah.
It's awful.
That 86 version.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell that. Well, that was Sting. That was definitely him driving that, I think. It was definitely more of a Sting vibe than the Police.
Yeah, it made us grateful that the Police didn't continue, because I'm like, and the video was shit. Also, it was just the whole thing was just a half. It was a half-hearted. It was almost felt like it was contractual obligation to go on like the greatest hits. So anyway, thank you for that asterisk on that. But thank you for that horrible memory that you
brought. But at any rate, my favorite tracks is "Driven to Tears" has always been one of my favorite Police songs. I think "Canary in a Coal Mine" is kind of like, and again, I was having a conversation with my friend about it, and we both, said "Canary in a Coal Mine" is one of those great Lost Police songs that people don't really think about very much. And again, it's got that ska vibe that I really, really dig. So those are probably those are definitely my two of my most favorite tracks on the record.
Yeah. Man in a Suitcase is kind of like "Canary in a Coal Mine." They're kind of very simple. Like they kind of have the same feel to it. So Eric, what do you got? "Shadows in the Rain"?
No, you know what? I actually prefer Sting's version. Yeah. I like the jazzed up, full jazz band. That's a great cover of a good song, but I prefer his version. No, "Driven to Tears" for sure. I was also partial to "Voices in My Head." Love the bass line on that. I just love just the groove of that thing. And I like "The Other Way of Stopping." I like the whole, Stewart. That's Copeland's baby right there too. I mean, it's just anything with him, that he's in charge, like he's driving it is always great with me. He was, aside from Sting, I mean, he was the man for me. Like he's what drew me to the Police. That distinctive drum sound, and he's still one of my favorites of today. So yeah. I'm glad he's very active on YouTube. He's kind of keeping himself out there, for new people to say, "Oh, who's this drum guy? Oh, he was in a band. Oh, he was in the." I think he's doing himself a great service by kind of doing that. No, he does a lot of YouTube shorts where he talks about songs, or he'll talk about. You saw that video with him and Jeff Lynne, right?
Where they played?
Yeah. That studio that he put, that's what the whole thing. And Jeff Lynne was there, and they were playing together, and he invites people. It's like Daryl's house, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
Where he invites all these people in, and they just do their songs or whatever, and does some Police, does whatever. But good stuff. I mean, he's just putting himself, like you say, putting himself out there and trying to be, remain relevant.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
But and to that point too, is like I said, that Drumeo video he did, even if you're not like a drum person and into the technicality of being a musician, it's a fascinating interview, and just to watch how he did what he did is fantastic. And then if I'm not mistaken, it's all three members of the Police have been on Rick Beato's show. Rick Beato is a studio owner that interviews a lot of musicians, and he did really, really great interviews with all three of them. So if you want to go down a deeper dive, after you check out 3324, check out those two places.
Thank you. I think when he interviewed Sting, he had Sting's guitarist with him. I think when he did that, Beato's he's blown up in the last year and a half to 2 years. He went from
rightfully so too.
Channel to bagging all these big artists.
Well, he passed 1 billion views, I think, and that's kind of gaining him traction now.
Yeah. You know what? We're not going to put a link to Rick Beato. He don't need it from us.
No, he really doesn't.
Rick Beato, if you're listening to this and you come on our show, then we'll put a link.
Yeah, all due respect.
Yeah. One hand probably brush the other. This ain't something for nothing, Rick.
Yeah.
For me, Driven to Tears, When the World is Running Down, to make the best of what's still around, which is probably one of the longer titles in rock and roll generally.
Yep.
Bombs Away. There's so much on here. I think for somebody that hasn't listened to, that kind of listens to, there's a lot of people, I listen to the hits. Like Chris said, jump on this album first.
Mm-hmm.
And we've said this in the past too. From this album, it's easy to go back and it's easy to go forward.
Yeah, it is.
Which I love when artists have that one centering album that you can find. We've used the word hinge, pivot point, right? Transitional album. I love when artists have the one that we can point people to that are looking to maybe discover or rediscover and this is the one, because you can easily go back, and then anything after this is going to kind of take you into the new Police, when they really started experimenting with the studio and layering, and Sting playing the saxophone, and all this crazy stuff that would happen going forward. So, Chris, any closing thoughts on Zeyatta Mondatta?
Like I said, I think it's an album that definitely needs more attention. That's less negative. I think, I always feel like whenever I read about it, it's always ranked last. It's always kind of like dumped on. And I think, like I said, I think it's just because of people knowing the circumstances of how it was recorded. And I think it should get way more love than it does for both the songwriting and like you said earlier, the production sound, especially on the guitar and drums. The guitar sound on this record, to me, is maybe the best guitar sound the Police ever had. And that's just my personal opinion.
Eric, should we not do any more Police albums then, so no one doesn't get in the way? So this and Synchronicity are all people ever going to hear about from us?
Well, I wouldn't mind doing Ghost at some point, but that's way down the road. I mean, we'll get to that.
2027. Any final thoughts, Eric, before we close up shop?
Like I said, I mean, like I very much what Chris just said. It is very underrated. I don't understand why. It's just as good as anything they've done, and would do. But yeah, check it out. Give it a listen if you haven't heard it, or if you have heard it and you didn't like it. Do yourself a favor and check it out again. Maybe you'll find something there that I find the older I get, I'm listening to stuff that I thought I didn't like back in the day, and I'm revisiting some stuff that it was just and I'm really really appreciating perhaps a different sound, especially if you hadn't heard it in a while. Yeah. So, it takes on a whole new life.
That's why I love doing this show is because of that, is revisiting and trying to listen with new ears or hear something different or take off the fanboy ears and just put on listening ears. And another great New Year's resolution is go ahead and listen to each album that we've done an episode on. That would be a fun New Year's resolution. a way to get into music is go ahead and listen to each album that we've done. That would be something kind of fun.
That would be a nice list.
Yeah. That'd be some challenge. That would be like a really nice one. But we'll leave it to you. You've already done the resolution by following us, so I'm not going to ask for too much. We're not going to overextend, Chris. Right? We're going to.
Nope.
We'll leave it here.
Though I will say, if you're done listening to the Police and you want to go down the Stuart Copeland wormhole, I would highly recommend the record that Eric talked about, Oysterhead, with Les Claypool and Trey Anastasio from Fish. It's
phenomenal.
It's a really interesting and quirky record, but definitely worth checking out.
Mm-hmm. There you go. And of course, Sting has a giant discography of solo hits. He's literally has fields of gold of records.
Yes, I caught that. Yes, I did catch that.
Eric, thank you. It had a delay on it, but
you know what? You and Zach need to get together, man, because he comes out with some. I mean, he's he thinks he's an old man, and he's coming out with these dad jokes that are just so like you would. You could spend the whole day together.
He's got the magic touch like I do.
There you go.
That's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Go ahead and follow us on Instagram, Facebook. The video versions of this are on YouTube, so you can check that out, as well as the audio. So you can actually listen to the audio or watch the video. They're two separate files on YouTube, so you can go check that out. New episodes come out each and every Thursday. 2025 is here. We're looking forward to beginning season 5 in a few short weeks. We'll be starting our 5th year. So if we make it past that, we'll have beaten the original Star Trek on their 5-year voyage.
Ding! You give yourself a bell for that one.
Ding. So for Christopher Clark, for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will catch you on the flip side of 2025.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.